My parents handed my entire trust fund to my sister, but they never checked the one document that would destroy them. When I say that out loud now, it sounds clean, sharp, almost elegant. But when it happened, it didn't feel elegant at all. It felt like being slowly erased by the people who had looked me in the face my whole life and called that love. I was 29 when I found out the money was gone. Not missing, not tied up, gone. $185,000 my grandmother had left in trust for me had been emptied out in a blur of wire transfers, cashier's checks, and family decisions. That somehow never included the actual person the money belonged to, and the worst part wasn't even the number. It was the way my mother said it. Calm. Light. Like she was explaining why she'd moved a casserole dish to a different shelf. "We used it for your sister's wedding," she told me, folding a linen napkin across her lap at Sunday dinner. It was important. Important. That word still makes something cold move under my ribs. Because apparently, my future wasn't important. The condo I'd been saving for wasn't important. The student loans I'd chipped away at wasn't important. The years I spent working 80-hour weeks in compliance, eating sad desk salads under fluorescent lights while my coworkers went home to actual lives, not important. But a 12-hour princess fantasy with imported roses, a string quartet, 3 outfit changes, and a champagne tower so tall it looked structurally irresponsible? That was important. I remember staring at my mother's mouth, waiting for her to laugh, waiting for my father to clear his throat and say, "Okay, enough, we're joking, we know you've had a hard month." But no one laughed. My father took a sip of wine like we were discussing the weather. My sister leaned back in her chair, one hand resting over the diamond on her finger like she was posing for a bridal campaign, and gave me that tiny patient smile she'd perfected over the years. The smile that said I was, once again, making things difficult by reacting normally to something insane. "You weren't using it," she said. That was the first moment I understood how completely they had rewritten me in their heads. Not as a daughter, not as a person, as storage. I had been storage my whole life. I was the daughter who could handle disappointment. The one who understood. The reasonable one. The low-maintenance one. The girl who didn't need as much because apparently competence is the fastest way to get punished inside a family that runs on excuses. My sister, Ava, was the opposite. Soft where I was precise. Effortless where I was deliberate. The kind of woman who entered a room like it had been built for her. She was beautiful in the kind of way people forgave on instinct. Big eyes, glossy hair, tears on command. She could crash a car, miss a deadline, forget a bill, scream at a hostess, and somehow leave with somebody comforting her. If she wanted something, the entire family became a search party. If I wanted something, I got advice. Be patient. Work harder. Don't be petty. Family helps family. You know how your sister is. I knew exactly how my sister was. That was the problem. Growing up, favoritism in our house wasn't obvious enough for outsiders to clock it right away. That's what made it so poisonous. It wasn't cartoonish. My parents weren't monsters slamming doors and shouting that they loved her more. They did it in polished little choices. Ava got a used convertible at 17 because she needed confidence. I got told that reliable girls didn't need flashy things. Ava dropped out of 2 majors, and they called her creative. I worked through college and got called intense. Ava forgot my birthday 3 years in a row, and somehow I ended up being told not to hold grudges. There's a very specific kind of loneliness that comes from being the child everyone praises in public and abandons in private. People think praise protects you. It doesn't. Sometimes praise is just prettier neglect. My grandmother, Evelyn, was the only person who ever said it plain. She never called Ava spoiled, or my parents unfair. She was too controlled for that. But she watched. God, she watched everything. She'd sit at the end of the table with those silver blue eyes and see every flinch I was trying not to show. When I was 21, A few months before she died, she asked me to help her organize old bank boxes and estate papers. I thought it was because I worked neatly, because I color-coded things and labeled folders and didn't panic around numbers. Now I know she wanted time alone with me. At one point, she closed the file drawer, looked right at me, and said, "Nora, some people will call your steadiness strength right before they try to stand on it." I laughed because I didn't know what else to do. Then she reached across the desk and squeezed my hand. "I see what happens in this family," she said quietly. "I need you to know that." No one had ever said that to me before. I can still feel the shock of it, like someone had finally opened a window in a room I'd been suffocating in for years. After she died, my mother told me Grandma had left me a trust that would be available when I turned 30. Not because I was irresponsible, she said, but because Grandma liked structure. The money could be used for my education, housing, or health before then if necessary, and my parents were acting trustees until the distribution age. I remember feeling almost embarrassed by the relief, not because of the money itself, though $185,000 is life-changing if you're paying your own way. It was the fact that someone had thought of me specifically, protected something specifically for me. For years, I treated that trust like proof that I hadn't imagined everything. If Grandma saw me, then maybe I wasn't invisible. I never touched it. Not once. Even when my student loans looked like a phone number. Even when my lease jumped, and I started picking up weekend consulting work. Even when my friends were getting married, buying apartments, posting photos in kitchens with sunlight and fruit bowls and stupidly expensive faucets while I was still. Calculating whether I could justify replacing shoes that squeaked in the rain. I waited because the trust wasn't just money to me. It was safety. It was escape velocity. It was the down payment that would let me stop pouring rent into someone else's mortgage. It was my grandmother's last clean act of faith in me. Every hard day, every Thanksgiving where Ava monopolized the room, every family dinner where I got talked over, I'd think, just make it to 30. Then you're out. Then you buy something with a lock no one else has a key to. And 14 months before my 30th birthday, my sister got engaged. The moment she flashed the ring, the house changed temperature. Suddenly, every conversation was about venues, flowers, playlists, drone footage, welcome bags, bridal skincare, custom stationery, monogrammed robes, private tastings, rehearsal dinners, after-parties, honeymoon upgrades, transport logistics, and the moral importance of peonies in early spring. Ava didn't want a wedding. She wanted a coronation. And my parents acted like it was their life's sacred mission to fund it. At first I assumed they'd help as much as they could, and then reality would kick in. But reality never kicks in for people who believe rules are for less loved children. I started hearing numbers in fragments. 15,000 for the venue, 8 for flowers, 12 for photography because the right eye matters, 40 for the catering package once she upgraded the wine. My father said things like, "You only do this once." My mother said, "We want it to be magical." And every time they did, I felt that old familiar pressure behind my eyes. Not because I was jealous of the wedding, but because I knew exactly what would happen later. They'd overspend. They'd panic. Then somehow the family would discover a moral reason why I should absorb the cost. Still, even I didn't think they'd go this far. A month after I turned 29, I met my mother for coffee because I wanted to ask for the annual statement on the trust. I was starting to look at condos, nothing huge, just a one-bedroom with decent light and a building that didn't smell like wet carpet in the hallway. Rates were miserable, inventory was thin, and I needed to know what I had before I could plan. That was all. A normal adult question. My mother's whole face tightened when I brought it up. "Oh, honey," she said, stirring her latte without looking at me. "Now?" That one word told me everything. I asked her what that meant. She said we should talk at dinner with Dad. I asked again. She said not to make a scene in public. I remember sitting there with my hand around a paper cup that had gone cold, hearing the hiss of the espresso machine, the scrape of chairs, the milk frother screaming in the background, and feeling like my body had started moving half a second slower than the room. At dinner they said it. Not with shame, not with apology, with justification. Ava's wedding had gone over budget. There had been deposits, then vendor changes, then unexpected obligations, and my father had decided the trust could cover it temporarily. Temporarily became fully. Then fully became it's all family money anyway. My mother said they were going to make it right eventually, maybe after they refinanced, maybe after Dad's bonus, maybe when Ava and Grant got settled. Like they were discussing repayment for borrowed patio furniture. I looked at my father and asked, "You stole from me?" And he actually flinched more at the word than at the act. "Don't be dramatic," he said. Nothing was stolen. We reallocated. Reallocated. That's the language people use when they want theft to sound managerial. Ava jumped in next, naturally. She said I was being unfair. She said she never asked for my money specifically, just family help. She said everybody contributed. She said the trust was sitting there, and besides, I had a job. I was independent. I wasn't struggling like some people. Then she added the line that burned every bridge that still existed in me. "You always act like you're the only one with a future." I laughed. I couldn't help it. It came out ugly and breathless. Because what do you say when someone steals your future and accuses you of hoarding it? I asked how much. My father stared at his plate and said, "All of it." There are moments that divide your life into before and after so cleanly, it almost feels theatrical. That sentence was mine. All of it. I saw the little details with painful clarity. The candlelight reflecting off my mother's wine glass. The embroidered napkins she saved for holidays. The smell of rosemary chicken turning my stomach. Ava's engagement ring catching the light like a flashing signal. The wall clock ticking with obnoxious confidence. Somewhere outside a dog barking. Somebody's car door slamming. Normal life continuing while my whole history with my family rearranged itself into something honest and disgusting. I asked if they had paperwork. If there was a trustee record. If they had authorization. My father snapped that I was not cross-examining him at his own table. My mother said legal language didn't matter because this was family. Ava started crying, of course, which instantly converted my parents into her defense team. My mother told me I was ruining dinner. There it was. The final family commandment. You can be robbed. You just can't react inconveniently. I stood up. My knees were shaking so hard I had to press a hand to the chair. I said, "If you spent $185,000 that Grandma left to me on Ava's wedding without my permission, then this is not dinner. This is evidence." Nobody stopped me when I walked out. Not one of them. I drove home so angry I had to pull into a grocery store parking lot because my vision was blurring. I sat there under a flickering light between a cart return and a minivan with one busted taillight and finally let myself cry. Not pretty movie crying either. The kind that hurts your throat. The kind that makes you fold over the steering wheel because your body doesn't know where to put that much grief. I wasn't just mourning the money. I was mourning the last version of my parents that I had been stupid enough to defend. That night, they started texting. "Mom, please calm down before you say something you can't take back. Dad, we will discuss this like adults. Ava, I can't believe you'd make my wedding about you." My phone lit up for hours with variations on the same theme. I was overreacting. I was selfish. I was embarrassing the family. I was acting transactional. Funny how money only becomes crude when the wrong daughter asks where it went. I didn't answer. At 2 a.m, I opened the old scanned estate file I kept in cloud storage. Most of it was summary language, letters after Grandma's funeral, vague references to the trust. Nothing detailed enough. My mother had always controlled the paperwork. But I did remember one thing. When Grandma was sick, she had used an attorney named Miriam Sloan, an estate lawyer with an office downtown. I still had a wrinkled business card from the day we packed boxes. I called at 9 the next morning. Miriam had retired. For 10 full seconds, I thought that was it. That the whole thing would disappear into technicalities and family gaslighting and my own exhaustion. Then the receptionist said the firm had merged, archives were retained, and if I was a named beneficiary, they could confirm whether documents existed after identity verification. That sentence was the first breath I'd taken since dinner. By Friday, I was sitting in a glass conference room across from a woman named Marina Alvarez, one of the partners who had inherited Miriam's archived estate files. Marina had the kind of composure I instantly trusted. Dark hair pulled back, navy suit, no wasted language. When I explained what had happened, she didn't make the sympathetic face people make when they want you to soften your own story for their comfort. She listened. She took notes. Then she asked the most beautiful question I have ever heard in my life. Did they provide you the full trust instrument, she said, or only a family summary? I said I'd only ever seen summary documents. She gave me a look that was almost invisible, but it changed the air in the room. Then let's not assume they know what authority they actually had. That was the beginning of the 14 quietest, hardest, most transformative months of my life. Marina pulled the full trust from archive storage. Not the summary, not the watered-down version my mother liked to quote when it served her. The entire restated instrument, amendments, trustee certifications, correspondence logs, and one sealed letter from my grandmother that had been retained with instructions to release if there was ever a dispute involving misuse. I remember Marina sliding the stack toward me and saying, "Your grandmother was more careful than your parents were." I read every page. Every single page. And halfway through, I found the clause. Buried in the administration section, drafted in language dry enough to put most people to sleep, was a removal provision. If the acting trustee used principal for the benefit of anyone other than the named beneficiary or engaged in self-dealing, their authority could be terminated immediately. Not maybe. Not after mediation. Immediately. The successor trustee was named in the next sentence. Me. Not a bank. Not my mother's brother. Not some neutral third party. Me. If I was over 25 and competent, I became successor trustee upon proof of breach, with authority to compel accounting, trace transfers, recover losses, seek legal fees, and pursue remedies against both the trustee and any recipient who knew the funds were misapplied. I read my own name 3 times because I thought I was hallucinating. My grandmother hadn't just left me money, she had predicted them. And the sealed letter, that letter broke me in a completely different way. It wasn't long. 2 pages. Dated 6 months before she died. In it, Grandma wrote that she loved both granddaughters, but she had observed a long-standing pattern of indulgence toward Ava, an expectation placed upon Nora. She wrote that I was likely to be treated as the child who could absorb sacrifice without complaint. She wrote that the trust existed precisely because she wanted one part of my future protected from family pressure, reallocation, persuasion, guilt, or emotional coercion. Then, in her neat signature script, she wrote, "If this letter is being read because Nora's provision was diverted, then the behavior I feared has already occurred." I put the pages down and cried into both hands in Marina's office. Not because I was weak, because being believed after years of being minimized is a violent kind of relief. Marina didn't rush me. When I finally looked up, mascara probably halfway to my jaw, she said, "We can win this. Not might. Can." People talk a lot about revenge like it's loud, explosive, public. But real legal revenge starts out painfully boring. It starts with calendars and PDFs and certified letters. It starts with sitting across from your lawyer on a Tuesday night eating vending machine almonds while she explains fiduciary breach standards. It starts with calling banks, requesting archived statements, tracing wire routes, and learning exactly how much lipstick, imported linen, and artisanal ice sculpture costs when funded by stolen money. My parents had transferred the trust funds in pieces. They thought breaking it up made it look cleaner. 20,000 to a joint family account, 15 to the planner, a cashier's check to the venue, 9 to a jeweler for Ava's bridal set, another chunk to the destination honeymoon package after Grant's family refused to cover business class seats. Some went to reimburse my mother's credit card after she fronted expenses. It was all there, every selfish decision with a date stamp. And Ava knew. That mattered. A lot. She didn't just benefit accidentally. Discovery pulled emails and texts that made my stomach twist. One message from Ava to my mother read, "Use Nora's money if you have to. She'll survive. She always does." Another said, "She's not married. She doesn't have kids. What is she even saving it for?" My personal favorite was a text to her maid of honor complaining that I was weirdly attached to dead grandma money. I printed that one and kept it in a folder by itself for days. Not because I needed evidence. Because I needed to look at something real whenever the old conditioning kicked in, and I started wondering if maybe I was being too harsh. That's what scapegoating does to you. Even when you have proof in black and white, some small damaged part of you still whispers, "Maybe don't make trouble." I made trouble. The first demand letter went out 6 days after Marina confirmed the breach. Full accounting requested. Notice of trustee misconduct. Demand for restoration of trust assets. Notice of my appointment as successor trustee subject to judicial confirmation, if disputed. It was gorgeous. Calm. Surgical. Devastating. My father called within an hour. I let it ring. He called again. And again. Then, my mother. Then, Ava. Then my Aunt Linda, the family diplomat who appears whenever someone wants consequences translated into misunderstandings. I didn't answer any of them. Marina told me to keep everything in writing, so I did. Which meant I got to watch my family reveal themselves without interruption. "Dad, you involved outside counsel before even talking to us?" "Mom, this is humiliating." "Ava, you cannot seriously be suing your own parents over a wedding." "Linda, I'm sure there's a peaceful solution." There had been a peaceful solution. It was called not stealing from me. When they realized I wasn't folding, the narrative shifted. Suddenly I was unstable, ungrateful, influenced by predatory lawyers. My mother told relatives I was trying to bankrupt them. My father said I had become obsessed with money. Ava posted passive-aggressive captions about protecting your peace from jealous people, which was especially rich coming from someone who had literally purchased peace with my future. I lost extended family in batches. Some stopped calling because they were cowards. Some called specifically to pressure me. One cousin told me, "I get that it's technically yours, but a wedding is family too." I said, "Then pay for it." He never responded. The loneliness of that period was brutal. Not dramatic, not glamorous, just long. Long workdays, long nights. Long silences after legal filings went out and nobody from my family apologized, because apology would have required admitting I was a person. I'd come home from work, kick off heels that had chewed my feet raw, heat soup, open another document packet, and keep going. I still did my job. I still showed up polished. I still reviewed compliance exceptions, prepared audit notes, sat in conference rooms under freezing air conditioning with men who thought my calm tone meant they could interrupt me. There was something almost funny about that season of my life. By day, I was identifying procedural failures in finance. By night, I was untangling the procedural failure I'd been born into. And slowly, piece by piece, Marana built the case. Not just breach, willful breach. Self-dealing, bad faith, knowledge, concealment. My parents didn't respond properly to the first accounting demand, so we petitioned. They tried to frame the trust expenditure as a discretionary family advancement. We filed the actual language showing discretion was limited to my needs. They claimed oral approval. We requested proof. None existed because they were lying. They claimed the money would have been repaid if I'd shown patience. Discovery pulled months of spending that proved otherwise. New patio furniture. A luxury watch for my father. Post-wedding resort stay extensions for my mother and Ava. They weren't planning repayment. They were celebrating survival after the theft. There is something deeply clarifying about watching people justify what they would condemn in anyone else. The first hearing was not dramatic. That disappointed Ava, I think. She arrived looking camera-ready, all cream wool and glossy hair and righteous sorrow. My mother dabbed at dry eyes. My father did what men like him do when paperwork finally arrives at the door. He tried to wear confidence like a necktie, tight enough to hide the panic. But judges are not dinner guests. Judge Holloway was a woman in her 60s with a voice so even it made everyone else sound theatrical. She did not care about family narratives. She cared about documents, timelines, authority, whether trust language said what it said. The first time my father's attorney tried to pivot into emotional context, she cut him off with one sentence. Counsel, sentiment is not a fiduciary defense. I nearly smiled. After that hearing, my family realized the courtroom was not going to operate on our old household rules. Nobody was going to tell me not to make a scene while they picked through my future with polished silverware. That's when the begging started, quietly at first. My mother sent me a photo from childhood. Me and Ava on the beach, maybe 9 and 11, both in matching yellow swimsuits, holding hands in the surf. Under it she wrote, "Is this really who you want to be now?" That text sat on my screen for 10 minutes before I deleted it. Because yes, in a way, it was. I wanted to be the version of me that finally chose herself over the role they wrote for me. My father tried a different tactic. He asked to meet for coffee, no lawyers, just father and daughter. I refused. He sent a long email about stress, market losses, the burdens of parenting, the sacrifices they'd made for both daughters. Buried near the bottom was the real point. If I kept pushing, they might have to sell the house. I stared at that line for a long time. Then I forwarded it to Marina. Not out of cruelty, out of memory, because I knew exactly what that email was. It was the old machinery. Make Nora responsible for everyone else's consequences. Dress it up as maturity. Call it compassion. Pretend her boundaries are violence, and your theft is grief. No more. Ava was the least subtle. Once she understood the case was serious, she switched from moral superiority to panic. She sent paragraphs at 2 in the morning. She said Grant was stressed. She said the lawsuit was affecting her marriage. She said she'd had no idea it would look this bad. She said maybe we could settle privately and move forward as sisters. As sisters. I asked her one question. When you texted Mom that I'd survive, because I always do, what exactly did you think surviving meant? She never answered. The months kept passing. Motions, responses, depositions, paper stacks, calendar holds. Little bursts of terror followed by weeks of waiting. Anyone who's never been through civil litigation thinks the hardest part is the courtroom. It isn't. The hardest part is the in-between. The space where your life keeps going while truth moves through official channels at the speed of old elevators. But something changed in me during those 14 months. At first I was fueled by outrage, then by grief, then by something steadier. Respect. Not for them, for myself. I started sleeping better once I stopped fantasizing about family reconciliation. That's a brutal sentence, but it's true. There is enormous peace in accepting that some people would rather lose you than lose access to what you provide. Once you see that, everything gets simpler. Sadder, yes, but simpler. I stopped rehearsing explanations, stopped trying to craft the perfect message that would finally make them understand. People who benefit from your confusion are not waiting for clarity. They are waiting for your exhaustion. So I conserved my energy for the place it mattered. The record. Marina found one more thing that changed the case from strong to nuclear. Remember that sealed letter from my grandmother? It wasn't the only archived item. There was also a trustee memorandum Miriam Sloan had drafted after a meeting with my grandmother and my parents years earlier. It summarized the trust administration rules explained to them in plain language. In other words, there was proof my parents had been told, clearly, directly, in writing, that the trust principle could not be used for Ava or for family events, and that misuse would trigger removal and personal liability. My father had signed receipt of that memorandum. When Marina showed me the signature page, I felt my entire body go still. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't confusion. It wasn't bad planning. It was theft with a witness. That was the document they had never checked. The one they forgot. The one buried in archive storage because people who think they'll never be held accountable are famously lazy about paperwork. And because they had spent 14 months acting like I was emotional, vindictive, and unreasonable, they never imagined the thing waiting to bury them was a document with their own signatures on it. The final hearing was scheduled for a gray Thursday morning in October. I hardly slept the night before. Not because I doubted the case. Because I knew by then that winning doesn't rewind anything. It just makes the harm impossible to deny. I laid out my suit on the closet door, charcoal, fitted, quiet. The kind of suit that doesn't ask for authority because it assumes it. I set my alarm for 5:30, but I was awake at 4:47, staring at the ceiling, counting the breaths between waves of adrenaline. When dawn finally thinned the dark around my apartment windows, I made coffee and stood barefoot in my kitchen holding the mug in both hands. The city outside looked washed in steel. I thought about my grandmother, about that office with the file drawers, about the way she had said some people would call my steadiness strength right before they tried to stand on it. Then I put the mug down and got ready. The courthouse smelled like old paper, wet wool, and stale heat. Everybody who's ever sat in one knows that smell. It's the scent of consequences taking physical form. Marina met me outside the courtroom with 2 binders and the same calm expression she always wore, which somehow made me calmer too. "You good?" she asked. I nodded. "Remember," she said, "they built this case for you. We just organized it. I'll love her a little for that until I die." My parents arrived 10 minutes later. My mother looked expensive and frightened. My father looked older than he had at the first hearing, like the past year had sanded his confidence down to something brittle. Ava came in last with Grant. Their marriage already looked strained from across the hall. No hand-holding. No whispers. Just 2 people in coordinated outerwear standing a polite distance apart. When Ava saw me, she froze. Not because I looked cruel. Because I looked calm. People who are used to your pain get unnerved when they can't reach it anymore. We took our seats. There's a strange hush that settles right before a judge enters. Chairs creak. Fabric rustles. Somebody coughs. Then, everything narrows. Judge Holloway stepped in, took the bench, glanced through the filings, and the room seemed to tighten around her. Arguments started. Opposing counsel tried one last time to turn it into a tragic family misunderstanding. Financial pressure. Poor judgment. Shared assumptions. Emotional strain around a once-in-a-lifetime event. The kind of language that hopes elegance will bleach intent. Then, Marina stood. She did not raise her voice. She didn't need to. She walked the court through the trust language. Through the transfers. Through the knowledge. Through the emails. Through the signed memorandum acknowledging the administration rules. Then, she handed up the archive exhibits, including the sealed letter and trustee memorandum. She ended with a sentence so simple, It felt like a blade. "This case is not about whether they loved their other daughter," she said. "It is about whether they were legally permitted to finance her celebration by liquidating my client's future." They were not. The courtroom went very still. Judge Holloway read for what felt like forever. Pages turning. Glasses lowered. A few notes. My heart was beating so hard I could feel it in my palms. My mother kept touching the pearls at her throat. Ava stared at the table. My father was trying not to look at Marina's exhibit binder, which was exactly how guilty people look when paper becomes more dangerous than anger. Then, the judge started speaking. Slowly. Precisely. No drama. Which made it devastating. She found the trust language unambiguous. She found my parents had exceeded and violated their authority. She found the expenditures were not for my benefit, not authorized, and not plausibly mistaken in light of the written memorandum they had received. She found Ava had knowledge sufficient to support recovery against her as a knowing recipient. She found the record showed concealment and lack of good faith. Every sentence landed like stone. My mother's face had already gone pale by then, but the real moment, the one I think about when people ask what justice felt like, came next. Judge Holloway lifted the trust instrument, turned to the removal provision, and read it into the record. In the event any acting trustee diverts principal or income for the benefit of any person other than the named beneficiary, Nora Elaine Mercer, and provided said beneficiary has attained the age of 25 years and is competent, Nora Elaine Mercer shall serve as successor trustee with full authority to investigate, compel accounting, recover diverted assets, surcharge the prior trustee, and pursue all remedies allowed by law, including fees and tracing against recipients with notice. Then, she looked up. The court recognizes Miss Nora Elaine Mercer as successor trustee pursuant to the governing instrument. My name. Out loud. In that room. On the record. I watched it hit them in real time. My father's jaw literally dropped before he caught himself. My mother went white in a way I had only ever seen once before, when Grandma's hospice nurse said it was time for family to come in. Ava made this tiny sound, not quite a gasp, not quite a whimper, and turned toward her attorney like maybe language itself had betrayed her. Because that was the moment they understood this was not a lecture, not a settlement nudge, not a family spat with legal accessories. Control had shifted. The daughter they had always treated as convenient had just been recognized, formally, publicly, as the person with power to recover everything. Judge Holloway kept going. She entered judgment for restoration of the $185,000, plus lost appreciation based on conservative investment performance, prejudgment, interest, attorney's fees, forensic costs, and equitable tracing remedies. She authorized liens where appropriate. She ordered full compliance with turnover requirements. She directed a detailed accounting within a strict timeline and made it very clear that failure to comply would expose them to additional sanctions. My father looked like he might be sick. Ava started crying for real then, not performative this time. Mascara, shaking shoulders, both hands over her mouth. Grant didn't touch her. And I sat there absolutely still. Not triumphant in the movie villain sense, not gloating, just still. There is a level of peace that arrives when reality finally says your name louder than your family ever would. Opposing counsel asked for leniency on enforcement timing, citing hardship. Judge Holloway's expression did not change. Hardship, she said, was created when they chose to spend trust assets earmarked for Miss Mercer on a wedding. I don't think I breathed for 3 seconds after that. The hearing ended. Chairs moved. Papers shuffled. The room slowly restarted. Marina touched my arm once, lightly, and whispered, "It's done." But of course, it wasn't done. Because then came the hallway. If you've never watched people lose the moral high ground they used to beat you with, it is almost surreal. My parents came toward me before their attorney could stop them. My mother first, eyes wet, voice shaking. "Nora, please," she said. "Please don't do this." I just looked at her. And maybe that was the cruelest thing I did. Not yelling, not listing everything. Just looking. Letting her stand inside the full truth of what she had done, without rushing to comfort her through it. My father stepped in. "We can figure this out as a family." I said. "You already did." Ava was crying hard now, face blotchy, hands trembling. "I didn't think." "No," I said quietly. "You didn't." That shut her up. My mother reached for my hand and I stepped back. That tiny movement seemed to break something in her. She started sobbing, saying they would lose the house, saying Dad's retirement would be ruined, saying she had made mistakes, saying mothers aren't perfect. Every sentence was about their pain, their fear, their fallout. Not one word about what it had cost me to be stolen from by my own parents and then blamed for objecting. Finally, she said the sentence I think she believed would save her. "We're still your family." And I answered the way I had rehearsed in my bones for 14 months. Family is not a legal defense. Marina, who I suspect enjoyed that more than she would ever admit, guided me toward the elevator. Behind us, Ava said my name once. Small, childlike. Like maybe if she said it the right way, I would step back into my assigned role and help carry her consequences one more time. I didn't turn around. Enforcement took months, because people who steal from you rarely become efficient when it's time to repay. There were asset disclosures, refinance negotiations, liquidations, panicked settlement calls, delayed compliance threats, and one particularly satisfying week in which my father suddenly discovered respect for deadlines after sanctions were mentioned again. The house was refinanced. My mother sold jewelry she used to describe as heirloom, which was ironic given her attitude toward actual inheritance. Ava and Grant had to unload the luxury SUV they leased 6 weeks after the wedding. A chunk of their wedding gift fund was traced. My father cashed out an investment account he'd sworn was untouchable. They found the money. Amazing what becomes possible when the golden child's fantasy is no longer subsidized by the scapegoat. When the final transfer hit the trust account under my control, I stared at the confirmation screen for a long time. The numbers were real, principal restored, growth component paid, fees covered. It wasn't magic. It didn't erase the dinners, the years, the casual betrayals stacked like plates in that house. But it was real. The law had reached into a family system built on denial and forced it to produce truth in dollars, signatures, and consequences. I bought my condo 3 months later. Not huge, not flashy, just exactly mine. South-facing windows, oak floors, a kitchen with room for 2 stools at the counter, a little balcony where the afternoon light turns everything honey-colored around 5. On closing day, I stood in the empty living room with my keys in my palm and cried again, but softly this time. Not from devastation, from release. There is a different quality to tears when they aren't begging to be seen. I framed one thing for the entry hall, not the judgment, not the bank confirmation. A copy of my grandmother's letter, just the last sentence in her own handwriting. The behavior I feared has already occurred. It hangs where I can see it when I leave and when I come home. Not as a wound, as a witness. People always ask if I ever forgave them. That depends on what they mean by forgiveness. Did I stop wanting to burn every family photograph? Yes. Did I stop replaying the dinner in my head? Eventually. Did I let go of the fantasy that I could have found a softer, kinder, more feminine way to ask for basic justice and still been respected? Absolutely. I let that fantasy die, and I'm grateful it did. But did I invite them back into my life because they cried in a courthouse hallway after losing the right to use me? No. My mother writes twice a year now. Birthday card, holiday card. Always careful, always vague. My father sent one email after the refinance closed saying he hoped someday we could move beyond legal events. I almost admired that phrase. Legal events. Like weather. Like hail. Like the sky had simply produced a judgment through no fault of his own. Ava got divorced 9 months after the hearing. I only know because my Aunt Linda, incapable of learning anything, called to tell me with the exact same tone she'd used when trying to pressure me to settle. Like the universe had finally offered me a coupon. I told her I wished Ava healing, and then changed the subject. That was true, by the way. I do wish her healing. Just not at my expense. That is one of the most important things I learned. You can wish people well from a distance your nervous system can survive. You can stop hating them without reopening the gate. You can tell the truth about what happened without becoming cruel. And if you are the daughter who was always told to understand, to absorb, to stay composed while everyone else made selfish choices and called them needs, please hear me when I say this. Your calm does not obligate you to carry theft politely. Your competence does not make your dreams communal property. Being the stable one in a chaotic family is not a contract to be consumed. I spent years mistaking endurance for love. I thought if I kept being generous, measured, articulate, impossible to criticize, eventually they would treat me with the care I extended to them automatically. But systems built on your self-abandonment do not reward better behavior. They reward interruption, boundaries, records, consequences. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for the version of you who survived all that minimizing is become impossible to quietly exploit. And for anyone listening who works in finance, law, compliance, accounting, for anyone who has ever sat in a polished office all day enforcing standards only to go home to a family that treats your own boundaries like optional suggestions, I need you to know that your instinct to document, verify, and pause before reacting is not cold. It is wisdom. It is self-respect with a spreadsheet. It is your life raft. I didn't win because I screamed louder. I won because I finally trusted what I knew. I trusted the number that didn't make sense, the silence that felt rehearsed, the language that sounded slippery, the sudden insistence that I was selfish for asking normal questions. I trusted the nauseous little voice that said, "This isn't messy communication. This is misappropriation with casseroles." And once I trusted myself, everything changed. The day I moved into my condo, I opened all the windows even though it was cold. I wanted fresh air in every room. I put a bottle of cheap sparkling wine on the counter, sat on the floor in my coat, and listened to the quiet. Real quiet, not the tense kind that follows conflict. The kind that comes when nobody in the world is waiting for you to surrender something to keep them comfortable. I thought about calling my grandmother out loud just to say, "You were right. You saw it. You tried to protect me, and in the end, you did." Instead, I stood by the balcony door and watched the light fade over the city, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like somebody's backup plan. I didn't feel like the daughter built to absorb impact. I didn't feel like storage. I felt expensive. Not in the shallow way, in the sacred way. Like my piece had finally become too valuable to hand out to people who only noticed it when it stopped serving them. So if you've ever been the family scapegoat, with the good job, the level head, the mature reputation that somehow translated into everybody else getting chances while you got expectations, if you've ever watched relatives spend your labor, your time, your emotional bandwidth, even your literal money, and then call you bitter when you asked for it back, let this be the story you remember. You do not need to become louder to become dangerous. You just need to become done. And if you're listening to me right now and some part of this feels uncomfortably familiar, the favoritism, the theft dressed up as love, the family meetings where your pain becomes an inconvenience the second someone prettier starts crying, then I want you to sit with this one question after I'm gone. What have they been calling love that only works when you lose? If you know that question in your bones, then you know exactly why I saw my own name enter the record and felt more relief than rage. Because in that moment, The little girl at the table who was always expected to understand finally got something better than understanding. She got proof. And if you've ever had to build your life back from the wreckage of people who swore they loved you while helping themselves to what was yours, stay with me. Tell me what they took. Tell me what you made them answer for. And tell me the exact moment you realized being the bigger person was just code for being easier to rob.